Good morning or evening, friends. Evening here. As you can see, this very dusky light. I have gotten through the better part of the day, and I am finishing my Sabbath at sundown on Sunday. So I'm going to shed some light on the subject because I'm going to need to be able to read my Bible. But I just letting you know that this is where I am on Sunday evening. My promise to myself has been that I am going to record my video in the morning before I leave the house on a daily basis because it's been so important. Because if I don't, as I see from the last 2 days of not doing it, it's more often than not likely to happen. But today, so since the last time I posted, that's been the case at least. Now, today, I have beat the odds and I am posting a video at sundown. So I would like to have you join me getting the week off to a great start, another chance. Um, I like the phrase, there's grace for that. So that if you've been failing at attempting to do something or not do something, um, and you're like, I started off good and now here I am again, then be encouraged that there's grace for that. Okay, and we can start again and thank God for that. So I want to make sure that I'm reading the right chapter today because I've missed a couple of days. So the chapter that we ended off with was 2 Samuel. I know, chapter 4. All right, Second Samuel chapter 4. 5 views. I hope that some of you 5 views are returning so that we have some consistency together. 2 Samuel chapter 5 today. All right. I'm having a hard time turning to that. No, it is not. At the beginning of the Bible. Okay, this is how far we have gotten in reading through the Bible. This is the page I'm on. Yep. Videotaping. I'm videotaping. There. That's how far we've gotten. All right. 2 Samuel chapter 5. Thought it started on this page. Where's the number 5? Oh, it's continuing on this page. Okay, there it is. All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, You will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler. When all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. Okay? So it's funny because I'm pretty sure that David has already been anointed. Okay? I'm going to just look that up if my memory serves me correctly because I'm sure there's some meaning to it if that's the case. So was David anointed king before Hebron? I probably came up, but I just was being particular because I didn't spell that correctly. I missed a letter. Okay, sorry guys. I was re-listening to a video and I thought, it's very hard to hear me when I am mumbling. Either I need a mic or I need to not mumble. Let me just be more clear. This is what this is about. Read aloud is about presenting the material clearly with good diction, with good what's the word? Audio in general. Okay, I'm sure there's some technological words for when you're using your voice. Um, but that's a big thing for me, a focus for me, because I want to start using my voice. I want to start making a living from using my voice. And I want to definitely spread the gospel message, as well as, you know, good material using my voice. So this does say, this is an AI overview. Yes, David was anointed king before he became king of Israel in Hebron. He was first anointed king of Judah. I see what they're saying. He was first anointed king of Judah in Hebron. So before he became king, he was anointed for it. Okay. Okay, let's see if he was actually. Oh. Okay, according to AI, it says, according to the Bible, David was anointed king of Judah in Hebron by the men of Judah. Later, all the elders of Israel came to Hebron and anointed David king over Israel. Mm-hmm. David reigned over Judah for 7 years and 6 months, and then over all Israel and Judah for 33 years. David was chosen to be king when he was young, but he had to wait 15 years before becoming king. He was anointed by Samuel and God to succeed Saul as king of Israel. So he was anointed previous to the men of Hebron anointing him. He was anointed by Samuel and by God himself. So that is just I think that's a good point to punch, because what God puts into play, is what happens. It says many of the plans of a man's heart. This is in the Bible, but it is the Lord's. It's either will or a word similar to that comes to pass. So, um, if you put that in your Google, you can find the reference for it and you get the exact wording. But yeah, it's something similar to what I talked about with a couple of ladies after church, and they were talking about it. As far as your calling, your purpose here on earth, other than the very general calling to, you know, um, go ye unto all nations and make disciples and teaching them to obey all that I've commanded, the basic message of following Jesus, that there there's a way for you to go, and a way for you to encounter the world that God has set into play too. So it's not about you, you know making something up and figuring it out, but there's some uncovering and some discovering to do in that. So it's already been put into play, and I like that. That's a good example with King David. All right, let's see. David, and then it says, when all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. So David had a part to play, they had a part to play, but it's all done before God. Where two or more are gathered, there he is. David, two or more are gathered in his name. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he was 15 when he was anointed the first time, it sounded like, right? And he reigned for 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem, he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. The king and his men marched to Jericho. Excuse me, Jerusalem. I saw the G-E-R. To attack the Jebusites who lived there. The Jebusites said to David, "You will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off." They thought, "David cannot get in here." Nevertheless, David captured the fortress of Zion, which is the city of David. On that day, David had said, "Anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach those lame and blind, and that's in quotes, who are David's enemies. And the reference for enemies says or who are hated by David. That is why they say the quote blind and lame unquote will not enter the palace. Okay. David then took up residence in the fortress and called it the City of David. Can't say I've caught all that, but let's keep reading and I'm sure it will come together. David then took up residence in the fortress and called it the City of David. He built up the area around it from the terraces inward. And there's a reference for terraces or the Milo. I won't stop at all the references if they don't seem too pertinent. Okay. And he became more and more powerful because the Lord God Almighty was with him. Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent envoys to David, along with cedar logs and carpenters and stonemasons, and they built a palace for David. Then David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel and had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. After he left Hebron, David took more concubines and wives in Jerusalem, and more sons and daughters were born to him. These are the names of the children born to him there: Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Nephag, Japhia, Elishama, Eliada, and Eliphelet. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they went up in full force to search for him, but David heard about it and went down to the stronghold. Now the Philistines had come and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go and attack the Philistines?" Yes. He's asking. I don't know what God said, but I said yes to him asking. "Will you deliver them into my hands?" The Lord answered him, "Go, for I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hands." So David went to Baal Perazim, and there he defeated them. He said, "As waters break out, the Lord has broken out against my enemies before me." So that place was called Baal Perazim. The Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David and his men carried them off. Once more, the Philistines came up and spread out in. That's cool. Spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, and he answered, "Do not go straight up, but circle around behind them and attack them in front of the poplar trees. As soon as you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the poplar trees, move quickly, because that will mean the Lord has gone out in front of you to strike the Philistine army." So David did as the Lord commanded him, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. And there's one more reference. Septuagint says, the references of Gibeon. And it just says Hebrew Geba. Geba is also called that. So, before that, I wanted to not leave with, there are questions that will not get answered the first time you read through, and that's okay, because they'll come back around and God will answer them for you faithfully. But I will give an attempt to not go past this chapter 5 without just kind of getting a better understanding about when he says the lame and the blind who are David's enemies. That is why they say the blind and lame will not enter the palace. And I'll just say, what does 2 Samuel chapter 5 verse 8, 8's just a big long verse, mean? Okay. 2 Samuel 5, 8, meaning. Let's check out the AI overview. In 2 Samuel 5:8, David is described as hateful towards the blind and lame. This verse may refer to the Jebusites' mockery of David and his troops, or to the blind and lame men who said David should not be allowed into the city. Explanation: the Jebusites mocked David and his troops, which made them overconfident. The blind and lame men may have said that David should not be allowed into. Okay. The tale of David's hatred of the blind and lame may explain the old taboo against disabled people entering the temple and David's palace. That seems strange to me. Okay, so let's see what WordPress.com has to say about it. 2 Samuel, did David really hate the blind and lame? And I didn't personally get that from the verse. I didn't realize that that was what was being said, but I didn't understand what was being said either. So let me just see what WordPress.com has to say. In 2 Samuel 5, we see that today is the day where David finally takes over Jerusalem, which becomes known as the City of David. All right, in 2 Samuel 5:6, and it says, and the king and his men went to Jerusalem unto the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, which spake unto David, saying, except thou take away the blind and lame, thou shalt not enter in hither, thinking David cannot come in hither. So, I mean, that to me says, unless you take away the blind and the lame, which David wouldn't be willing to do, and they probably knew that he wouldn't be able to do, then you just can't come in. And I don't really, that just seems like some kind of word thing. But let's keep reading. This is a somewhat perplexing passage, because it seems like we're literally talking about the blind and lame. However, look at who's talking. This is what the Jebusites are saying to David. Many people use this as a justification for the belief that David hated people with disabilities. I had no idea. But it says this is what the Jebusites are saying to David. If you take in the statement and reword it slightly, you can see how it would easily be understood as, if we keep the blind and the lame, you will not get in here. Basically, they're taunting him. They're saying that unless you take away every last one of our defenders, even the weakest ones, there is no way you're getting in here. That makes sense to me. Okay. Even blind and the lame could easily defend such a magnificent stronghold. Nevertheless, and this is in verse 7, David took the stronghold of Zion. The same is the city of David. And then in verse 8, where I was reading, and David said on that day, whosoever getteth up to the gutter and smiteth the Jebusites and the lame and the blind that are hated of David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. Wherefore, they said, and this is a little different translation, right? The blind and lame shall not come into the house. I am sure that this is where many critics who go in response to what I just wrote, this is where many critics who go in response to what I just wrote. That doesn't quite make sense, but let's keep reading. This verse, quite frankly, says that the lame and the blind are hated by David. How would I answer that? It actually is not very difficult to answer. Remember, this is what David is saying. I think there's some typos, but to his men. They all knew that they had been taunted by the people of the city. They all knew that the people of the city had said that the lame and the blind could keep the armies of Israel away. David has basically said, okay, let's see them. They're blind and lame. Try it. Basically, he was using their misplaced confidence as a motivational tactic for his men. He hated the men that taunted him, and in this case, it was the men who defended the city. The men who defended this city said that the blind and lame could do it. Therefore, David was saying that if this is actually the case and the blind and the lame are really defending that wall, let them try and hold us off. David hated them because, as David hates all enemies of God, they taunted the children of the Israel of God. He did not hate them because they had disabilities, and from what I can tell, we really do not even know if there were any defenders with disabilities. It seems as if this was largely a taunt thrown down by the inhabitants of Jerusalem, which was then turned into a motivational technique by David. This passage is attacked by critics, but that is generally the result of proof texting. If you take a few words out of context, it might not make any sense, but think about the bigger picture. I think all in all, well said. Even I had a little bit of trouble with some of the typos, but I say good point on reading the Bible in general. Like, look at the larger picture, and when there's a question like that, usually if you want to go to some, rather than just saying, I'm sure that'll come clear to me later, if you want to go to, some commentary on it, there's usually people who have read it and read the context enough to have done that footwork for you. And most of the time it makes a lot of good sense. And I think that's a good point to go away with. Like, sometimes you use the enemy's words against the enemies, like, whoever that is, then that's, then I will, whoever it is that is taunting God, or whatever it is in our life that is saying, you can't come up against me. Let them know, whoever's saying it, even if it's yourself that's saying it, no, I hate the enemies that come against what God has said and what God has ordained. And even in our service at church today, we were talking about David's psalm that he wrote after his sin with Bathsheba, his sin towards Uriah. I think it's Uriah or Uzziah, her husband. But he said, is to you alone who I have sinned against, God. Did that mean that he didn't sin against Bathsheba, what he did, and against you? No, absolutely not. He had sinned against his fellow man. But what he's pointing to is, I sinned against you. I'm your enemy. I came against you and what you've established that I would do in love towards my brother and my sister, and you're the one I'm sinning against. I'm your, and I was your enemy, and I repent for that. So I think that's enough said. Let's go with God into our week, and I am fully expect to see you, or for you to see me tomorrow. God bless.